All right. Well, I'll just get started. Well, first off, I want to thank everyone here for inviting me to this debate. I'm representing here Debate and Relax. I'm also representing Coast to Coast as well. Um, I'm taking the affirmative in the stance. Belief in God is rational, so that's the position that I'm taking. And I'll start off with my opening statement. So, first thing is that I think it's prove anything. So we use faith in different ways, even though we don't want to admit it. And faith itself is not irrational, but faith without any evidence, or what we would call blind faith, is what is irrational. But belief in God doesn't have to be a blind faith. In fact, believe there's a lot of evidence for belief in God. Um, Ironically enough, if you look at atheists and agnostics, they themselves have a certain faith in some of their worldviews, especially concerning improbable events that you would deem as miracles because of the sheer improbability of them. For example, the idea that something came from nothing in the creation of the universe, the idea that order coming from chaos, how life came from non-life, consciousness came from non-consciousness, how transcendence arise from consciousness, and these are things that science has not been able to explain. It takes a lot of faith to believe that they just exist simultaneously without any explanation. So, a lot of agnostics and atheists have faith as well. It's just a matter of following the evidence where it leads. So some of the evidence for God that I'm going to talk about today or share today is, I think, the three biggest ones that I think are the easiest to understand and are my favorite are the cosmological argument. So Plato insisted this back in his time that there must be an uncaused first cause that initiated the universe, right? And then I'm going to go talk into how the Big Bang Theory actually shows and points to that uncaused first cause. There's a teleological argument, which is known also as the fine tuning argument. Socrates was the first one to actually kind of have a version of this. I'm going to specifically talk about fine tuning and fundamental constants are very, very peculiar and have a very small error measurement and depend on you know, the formation of the universe specifically. Then I'm going to address the moral argument and the existence of objective truth and objective morality. Um, and if objective morality does exist, there must be someone who creates that objective morality that is above the opinion of humans, that is greater than humans, or else it's just a matter of finger pointing opinions. Um, Now, these are only three of many arguments for God. There's a couple other arguments that we could get into depending on how things go. We could talk about the transcendental argument that talks about how in order to know things, you have to have a transcendent being. The cosmic conscious argument that makes the argument that consciousness can only come from consciousness, so there has to be a greater consciousness than human consciousness. And then something that's very new in science that's been arising over the last 5 to 10 years is the idea of an emergent universe in digital physics. And what we're seeing is that we actually can model a universe virtually or even as a simulation, which implies that there is some type of simulator, right? There's either a mind of an individual that is creating the universe that we're living in, or there's a programmer, right? And it's very interesting when you look at these arguments. So we could get into that as well. But the last thing I wanted to say for my opening statement is when you look at the alternatives to theism itself, some of the answers get pretty bleak. So, I mean, quickly, if you look at polytheism, I mean, it kind of boils down to some form of theism because you're going to have a ranking of the gods. One god's going to have to be more powerful than the other. Agnosticism doesn't really say much. True agnosticism is just taking a neutral stance of I don't know. It doesn't necessarily always follow the evidence where it leads, or just kind of stalemates the evidence. And then the third possibility outside of theism is if you just look at atheism. And if you're going to take atheism seriously, it's going to lead to some absurd philosophical conclusions, such as nihilism, postmodernism. Basically, no, you can't acknowledge free will, which means you can't really acknowledge consciousness. So you're living in the state of there's no free will, there's no consciousness, there's no objective morality. Life is bleak, and I mean some of the greatest philosophers of our ages and our times, both present and past, have come to these conclusions from atheism. So it's not a very unrational take to look at the absurdity that atheism leads to. Um, yeah, and that's my time.
All right, thank you, Josh.
Good evening. My name is Godfather Time. I'm representing the PNR Politics and Religion server. I'm taking the negative on belief in God is not. I believe in God is rational. I'm taking the negative. For me, I find all gods to be assertions until proven. And in the equation of life, you have integers and non-integers. And gods have always been a non-integer. They've been a placeholder for things that we know not of at the time. But Thor was no more a reality because he was asserted, but what he represented, the cause of lightning and thunder, was a thing. Like he represented the function that was nature, but was masked by the definition of a deity. I find that if we do not have a understanding of a source of things, it would be irrational to say that this is the thing that caused everything when we have no grounding to assert that that thing is possible or is in existence. I don't want to touch on everything that was touched in that, but there was a lot, and we can go through that coming up. But I will try to clarify one thing. I don't use faith. If we go to what the Bible says about faith, Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance for what we do not see." That is faith. I use trust. Trust is repeatable, demonstrable, testable. I can trust that my brakes in my car work because I've driven my car since I bought it and I've used the brakes. I can be wrong and my brakes could fail. They could have been cut. They could have lost enough fluid so that they don't work. But there was a repeatedness behind it. If I was just to put a bunch of bricks together and then jump off a cliff and say, this is going to save me because I have faith, that's faith. It has no grounding or background in it. It is just what you hope for. Things not seen. But we'll go back to that later. And then as far as where we go throughout this conversation to go back to the beginning of all things and to say that this needs an explanation and it is my God, but then to say that my God need not an explanation because definitionally he is uncaused and definitionally he has no beginning. Doesn't do anything other than just say that you defined it as such and you provided no more evidence for that assertion than just your assertion. So I hope we can get into a lot of stuff. I hope to have a good time, and I hope I can represent the PNR server well. And I think I'm ready to go into the back and forth.
Awesome. Thank you, GF2. Yeah, y'all can go ahead and start the open dialogue.
Sure, Josh, how you doing tonight? You got something for me to start?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Josh. You sound a lot better now.
Yeah, sorry. I guess the one thing I wanted to start with was so you mentioned, I think you accused me of doing a God in the gaps argument, but I'm not actually doing a God in the gaps argument. I'm actually using the evidence from science itself to show, and philosophical arguments as well, to actually show that this is pointing to a created being and a creator. So another thing you should mention is just because we don't know something, I mean, it has to be known. Well, we can always follow the evidence to where things lead, right? And so if the evidence is pointing towards a certain direction, it's not irrational at all by any means to sit there and say, hey, well, the evidence is pointing to this, so let's look at it. I mean, we do this in everyday life and whatnot. So those are two of the things that I wanted to mention. And, I can address your comments on trust and faith. I think that's being a little pedantic. I mean, trust and faith go hand in hand. You don't have faith in somebody if you don't trust them. You don't trust them if you don't have faith in somebody. So I think that was just a hand in hand comment, but he kind of admitted to what I'm saying. You trust your car is going to turn on, or you have faith in your car turning on because of the evidence that it provides. So it kind of just proves a little bit my point of what I'm saying there.
If we have the word for faith and we have the word for trust, and they have varying definitions, they're not the same word, right? We might be able to use them if we vaguer up the definitions stuff. We could use them interchangeably, but if faith and trust are equal, there's an equal sign, not not a difference of them. That they could be somewhat synonymous, but they don't have to be. Not a circle.
Well, what is the definition that you're using? I'm sure there's an overlap in definitions.
Sure, we could do. I read you to the definition of faith that I
Sure,
use.
you're using a biblical. Well, you're using the Bible, but I never argued that faith had to be a biblical. I don't know. I mean, if you want to stick on that, sure, we can play semantics, and I can just change faith to be trust.
Trust definitionally is the firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. So reliability means testable, demonstrable. Ability means that you have viewed their ability to do something. So you have some background. So trust has background and grounding, whereas faith is what is not seen and what is hoped for. So that's why I would say that there's differences. Like people may want to use them interchangeably, but if they're the same word, we wouldn't use two words. Like we would use faith or trust and trust.
I reject your definition of faith. I mean, if you look it up in the Oxford Dictionary, faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. So here's the intersectionality between faith and trust. So, I mean, you're saying the same thing. When you say you trust something, or you have faith in something, you have trust in it. So I could use your same definition for that.
I'm going with Hebrews 1:11 definition if you want to go with that, but if not,
for the sake of my argument, I'm not going to go with that because that's a specific theological context that is outside the realm of this debate. So,
well, that's what I was saying. I'm setting up the difference that trust is not the same thing as faith, because this is saying that faith is the things hoped for and the things unseen, and trust has background. But I digress. Like from here, you're saying that you go to where the evidence points you. What was there a series of signs that say a God is possible and the God is the cause of this, and it led you that way? Or were you like, there's no way that this is possible other than a God, therefore the God's the one that did it?
Yeah, we could go through the cosmological argument. So specifically, Leibniz's version of the cosmological argument would provide some clarity to what I'm saying. So I'll go through this quickly, but basically, the first premise is that anything exists has an explanation of existence, right? The universe, premise 2 would be the universe has an explanation for its existence. And that explanation is grounded in a necessary being, which we can get to. Premise 3, the universe exists. Premise 4, the universe has an explanation of its existence. And then premise 5, therefore, the explanation of existence of the universe is grounded in a necessary being. So essentially what I'm saying to in layman's terms is that philosophically we have the explanation of its existence, and it has to be grounded in something. And because the universe exists, it's grounded in something. And we can get into what that something is. But if we look at evidence from the Big Bang, we point to that. Yeah, the universe is not its own eternal being. There has to be something else before there.
Can we take that step by step? You said that everything that exists has an explanation. That was premise 1?
Yes, that's correct.
Does your God exist?
Does my God exist? I mean, I'm proving a theistic type of God.
No, I'm asking, does your God exist?
Yeah, I believe God does exist. But what does that have to do with the
by premise one, he has an explanation, therefore he has to have an explanation for his existence. If everything that exists has an explanation, your deity has to have an explanation for his existence. What is the explanation for your deity's existence?
An eternal being. It's a necessary first cause. It's an uncaused first cause that I believe it was Plato talked about. There has to be an uncaused first cause, and that is God.
There has to be. Right.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to go into
matter of fact,
there has to be something that is eternal, that created everything.
And this has to be a personal God.
Well,
It
to get
has
to
to
the
be this.
personality of it, we would have to look at the evidence of why it would be personal God. So, regardless of what you think created or started the Big Bang, that entity, that being, that thing, chose to create. It had some type of sentience to create, right? It can't just randomly create, and if it does, we can get into that a little bit more. But it chose to create, and it chose to make a decision of to have something rather than nothing. So therefore, now it is personal.
I think that's a lot of assumptions that you've made, and you haven't provided any evidence other than you just said definitionally it has to be so, which is just a just so story. That doesn't give me anything to go off of other than this is what it is. Do we have evidence to suggest that that there's an uncaused cause that knows how to cause everything and caused everything?
Well, I think it just logically follows. We can't
Why?
have an infinite regress. Would you agree?
Do you think that do you think that things just because something is necessarily logical or makes sense to me, it is actual? You think just because something makes sense to you, or just because it has to make sense, like it is what it is?
I'm not understanding your question, but I think what you're trying to get at
Because
is
you're
that. Well, go ahead.
because you
Explain your question again. Actually.
well, it seems like you're like it has to be this way, otherwise things wouldn't exist. Like you have to have this sort of overarching explanation of things, but that doesn't instantiate that there is that explanation, or that the universe owes you that explanation. Like just because something
But
doesn't make sense to you
uh,
doesn't
yeah.
mean
So
that
so what caused the universe? Is it just came out of nothing? Is there a
well,
cause, or is it
I
just it's just there?
I mean, I would say for the sake of the debate, that the sake of the debate is whether or not belief in God is rational, not whether or not the universe had a cause.
Well, no. Hold on, but that
Um,
is part of the
so,
debate because if the universe has a
oh, not necessarily,
cause,
because you see, like
that
for
could
me,
lead to a god.
well, hold on. You see, like for me, like I studied geology in college, so like I can refute varying God claims from just our Earth's formation. I don't need to go back to the beginning of time because like we have more evidence to understand the formation of our Earth than likely the cause of the cosmos. And if your assertion is that a God is needed for the formation of the Earth, and I know it not is, then we don't need to go back any further. We're just moving the goalpost to a gap that we don't know. You're saying you don't want to argue the God of the gaps, but to say that we don't know where the universe came from, that's an I don't know. And then you're saying, but here God gaps. And
Well, no, hold on. This is a logical conclusion. It's not a god of the gaps because the evidence shows things had a
there's no evidence.
beginning.
There's just assertions.
No, it's not, and I'll provide you the evidence. So if you look at, let me find it for you. Um, would you agree that the universe itself is expanding? Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, for me, like I said, I went to college for geology. I like non-avian dinosaurs. I get my rocks off. I tertiarily hold to what people will claim as far as astronomy, and allegedly, yeah, we are due to either dark energy or dark matter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The
So
universe is
Edward,
allegedly.
yeah, Edwin Hubble, he showed that the universe is expanding. And we've had this. I think it's been for 20 years almost. The Border-Booth-Lincoln theorem even states that an expanding universe cannot be eternal itself. So that means the universe has a beginning. Would you? I think it's very clear the universe has a beginning. So if it has a beginning, we have to. We can ask ourselves the question: well, what was before the beginning? And
Well,
I think it's very clear before the beginning. Um, it was spaceless. It was timeless, right? Because there's no space and time in the beginning. There's no matter and no energy. I mean, energy is emerging from the Big Bang. So whatever was before the Big Bang, started that singularity point is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. So we're now formulating something that we could maybe call a god, whatever you want to call it. But this is how we're getting there. This is not just an assertion. This is just thinking logically of, okay, if the universe itself is not eternal and has a beginning, well, what's before then? What caused this giant cosmic explosion we see?
And by your estimation, because we don't know how it started, you're saying an uncaused, immaterial, non-matter, a non-thing, a non-existent thing, caused everything to exist. And it knew how to cause everything to exist before it did all of that. And it existed for non-time because it started time. But you're saying that's the logical explanation for everything, is that an uncaused thinking agent that knew how to do everything from making the sun to making the blister beetles juices in his buttocks shoot out acid to be able to make parasites dig into the eyes of children. Your God knew from time immemorial that how to do all of that stuff and set it all into motion before time and matter. And you're saying that's the most logical explanation to all of existence.
Well, no, I didn't say most of the stuff you said there, but I logically I think it's very easy to
Would it not
show that.
entail?
No. Well, logically, I think it's very easy. You're right. That's what it entails. But logically, it's very easy to get to the timeless part because time wasn't there before time came into existence. Space wasn't there before space came into existence. Matter wasn't there before matter came into existence.
And
So
so you have no
whatever was
time,
there
no
is
matter.
not space. It's not time. It's not material.
Yeah, which means it doesn't exist. If it doesn't observe time, if it doesn't take up space, and it's not made of matter, it doesn't matter.
So you think it's
Unless
nothing?
somehow you can
You're telling
prove
me
that that's a
nothing
thing.
created something.
I didn't say that. You said nothing created something because you said your God's
Oh
not made of
no.
matter. It didn't observe time, and it what was the third thing? Like you're saying nothing created something. You said your deity, who's not made of matter, which is nothing, made something. I again, I'm not a Big Bang cosmologist. I go back to the formation of the Earth, and we can do that. But as far as Big Bang cosmology goes, it came from something like the whatever you define as the singularity or the low energy state, like there was something there. You said something, or rather nothing, an immaterial, non-observer time and non-spatial, right? So it doesn't take up space, it doesn't take up time, and it's not made of matter, made everything. So your nothing made everything. Mine would have came from other things. So I don't put your worldview on me, please.
No. Hold on. You're. I think you're twisting the words. What I'm saying is that whatever it was before, that something
Was not made of
is
matter.
not made out of space. Is not made out of time. Is not made out of matter.
Then what is
That's
something?
all I'm
What is your
saying.
definition of something? What is your definition of something then? Because if something has to take up time, space, and matter, because that's like just like the grounding of existence. If you exist, you take up time, space, and matter. You're saying something that doesn't take up time, space, and matter doesn't exist then. Started everything. So that's your definition,
Well,
not mine.
yeah, it's part of the
What you
immaterial
have.
realities that we have. Would you recognize that there's an immaterial world out there?
I have no idea what that means. What do you mean? What would give me
For
an
example, a
example of an
thought. Can
immaterial
you
world?
taste a thought? Can you feel a
Can
thought?
I taste a thought? I can
Yeah.
think a thought.
Yeah, but is a thought, is that a real thing, or is it, what is a thought?
Yeah, it's a concept that my brain produces due to electrochemical responses in the brain in different brain states. If I'm in one brain state, I can have cogent thoughts. If I'm in another brain state, I can have non-cogent thoughts. If I'm in a sleep state, I can have dream thoughts. Like I mean, we have thoughts, but they come from our brain. I mean, it's not like they're just
Yeah, but they're
are you
immaterial.
saying you walk into a thought?
No. I'm saying they're immaterial. You can't describe a thought with a formula, right? But we know it exists, and it's an immaterial thing. So there's an immaterial world out there that we acknowledge, and I could give you
No,
other
I think
examples.
that's your assertion. I'm not saying that. That you still
Well,
haven't
can you
proven that.
describe to me what a
Once again,
thought
I
is?
don't agree that the thought. I've explained to you what a thought is. A thought is electrochemical responses in the brain that we have. Like they're concepts that we can come up with because we're thinking agents. Like they're not some sort of. You don't walk into a thought. Like there's no thoughts
Yes,
without brains.
exactly. You don't walk into it because it's immaterial. It's not just your
But it
electrochemicals.
comes from a material source. It's like saying I breathe out and it's immaterial. It's like, no, like there's atoms and stuff involved, just like there's electrons, so electric, impulses and stuff, uh, that are made up of the things.
It doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't matter where it comes from. The point I'm saying is that it's an immaterial concept of a thought.
What's
Another
your
example would be
assertion?
like the laws of logic or math, the laws of mathematics. They're
Math,
immaterial things that we point to, but you can't
math is
always
the way that
describe
we
them
categorize things.
physically.
Math is the way
You can't see
math
a
is the way that
thought,
we categorize things. It's like I can go one ammonite, two ammonites. Two is just a concept. I can if we in another language I say dos, right? Or du. In other languages we have different representations for this, but we communicate the idea that this means two. But you're not going to walk into two out in the world. It's just a category, a way that we can communicate with one another. Like it's not like we came up with math, we came up with numbers. It's just as much a language as in Latin, Spanish, and English. Like,
Well, you're actually proving my point, though, that there's an immaterial world that exists. That's all my point
no,
is.
it's observation. It's not immaterial. Like math didn't
So you can
arise to
observe.
be observed.
You're telling me you can observe a thought. That's what you're telling me.
They've already said that, yeah.
Okay. So what thoughts? Can you see my thoughts right now?
No, but if we put you into certain like MRI machines, we can see regions of the brain that light up whenever you're thinking things, or we give you outward stimuli. And there's actually been at least one case where they've hooked a person up to an AI, and the AI was able to somewhat accurately decipher what they were watching. She was watching some animated video of a girl being chased by a dragon, and it depicted the scene of how she tripped and stuff, and her watching her. So we're getting better at being able to, map out and see things. But I mean, we've always known that the brain is where that stuff comes from. People who like don't want to be that way to be that way.
Okay. Well, not to belabor my point, but you may be able to put me up to a brain machine, but you can't actually tell me what I'm thinking, right? But that thought that I have exists. You may say, well, it's an electromagnetic thing in my brain, but you're never going to actually be able to decipher the differences between two thoughts because they are in the immaterial reality.
Well, I mean, that's your
And-
assertion, but that would just be an assertion. That is not a fact.
Well, but so
Do you-
are
do you
you
have a
implying that there's no
degree in
such thing as an
neurology?
immaterial world? That's
Do
what
you,
you're
do you have a
saying.
degree in neurology?
And I don't need a degree in neurology. No, there's an immaterial.
I'm just saying, if you don't have a degree in neurology, then I wouldn't make assertions about what we can and cannot do in neurology. Like that would just be absurd. Like, I
Well,
don't
what
wanna
is
be
what
that
what is
arrogant.
it doesn't disprove my point that there's an immaterial. There's things that are immaterial
Once
that
again,
are not physical, but
you
we know
haven't
they
even
exist.
proved. One thing, you haven't even proved the immaterial. You've made assertions and I've dismissed them with rebuffs, and then you went, I am unscathed. You're the Black Knight and Monty Python. It's something to be respected, but I don't know.
Yeah, again, things like the laws of logic, they exist. It doesn't matter if you take all humans on the earth; they still exist. They're still there, and that's just part of the immaterial world. So, I mean, if you want to deny the immaterial
The
world,
laws of
that's
logic,
fine.
again,
That's
it's a
very
way that we
fine.
categorize things. Like the laws of logic, the law of identity. Like it really is. When a Tyrannosaurus Rex was roaming the plains of North America and it saw its prey item, it didn't have to go, that is my prey item. That cannot not be my prey item, and there cannot be nothing else that is my prey item. It's like that is my prey item. African lions today, when they see certain zebras on the savannah, they're like, I'm going after this one. You can watch other prey items will stop and let them run past that one. All they have to do is, I don't have to be that motherfucker. I just don't have to die tired. Let him run because he's got him. Like we just because we make something and say, oh, we're clever by thinking one, it can only be one. That doesn't mean anything. It's just a way for us to like communicate language once again. Like this doesn't privy us to an immaterial world. It's just that we make observations that go, oh, isn't that clever? Like that's all it's done.
Yeah, again, you keep kind of describing what I'm saying, or it doesn't mean anything. It's something that just is made up. That's exactly my point with the immaterial world. So you're actually proving my point. And I thank you for it, but
I'm
We
glad.
can
Yeah,
move
no,
on if you want to, but I think that kind
yeah.
of
So
proves the point that I'm saying.
well, I mean, I don't know who you proved it to because you didn't prove the immaterial world to me. So unless it's an appeal to the audience, I'm still not convinced that there's an immaterial
Well,
world.
until you can describe me the chemical formula for, say, justice, or
Oh, I
give
can do
me
that. I told you.
tell me what my thoughts are, there's still an immaterial world out there. It exists,
I told you I
whether you
went to
want to believe it
college
or
for
not.
geology. Why do you think I have to come up with chemical thoughts to disprove your assertion that there's an immaterial world out there? How
Because if you
close?
can't disprove it, then how can you prove
Then
it
it
wrong?
must be true.
My point.
I say that the Earth is 4.4 billion years old and non-alien dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. Can you disprove that?
Well, there would be evidence for that, and I'm providing you
I'm
evidence that
just
the
saying, yeah, and I can,
immaterial world
but no,
exists. You're
just
just
saying
saying, I think
right
what you're
now.
just trying
Can
to
you
say, it was
disprove that
created by
right now?
humans, but that's kind of
Can-
just my point.
That's not how we
It's made
do
up.
things.
It's fictional. We can't
Just
actually
because
describe
someone
it,
is
see it, or touch
asserting
it,
something,
but it
just
exists.
because someone just because someone asserts something doesn't mean it's factual. And just because you've asserted there has to be or there is an immaterial world does not mean there is. And that doesn't mean I have to disprove it. And once again, every example you've brought up so far, I've been able to go, that's not it. That's not it. And then you just went on like, oh, he said nothing of value, which is cute, but it didn't get us anywhere. Because then once again, you're like, oh, you've just proved me right. And I'm like, I didn't. But yeah, I mean, if we're fine with you saying that there has to be an immaterial world, and I'm like, nah, there's not, and then we could just move on to the next thing, that's fine because I don't think more than
Well,
this is not going to get us anywhere.
I think
What's your
it's
next
proper
thing?
to concede to your point that you don't think there's an immaterial world that ever exists. And that's fine. And that kind of just shows a little bit of the irrationality side of this. That, I mean, clearly we know that there's an immaterial world that exists. I mean,
Clearly,
I gave you plenty of
okay.
examples. I think it's intuitive and it logically follows. You might not think so, but again, I don't know. You don't. I guess you don't think the laws of logic exist. So I don't know how you work around that. But I think it's pretty clear to everyone that there is some type of immaterial world. At least one thing's immaterial. So if you want to concede that there's no such thing as an immaterial world, I think you're pushing in toward the irrationality side of things, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, no, I'm fine if your definition of the immaterial world is thoughts, mathematics, and logic, and it somehow creates this other realm that your non-existent by your definition, non-spatial, non-time observing, and non-made of matter deity exists in this realm of numbers. Sure, that's where you can couch them.
Well,
But yeah, I don't think that that's something that's like you're going to be able to glean anything from that the immaterial numerical world is what created the universe. But sure.
I'm asking you what created the universe. You seem to be dodging the question. It sounds like you're saying it's nothing.
Say again. Like I said, what are we going back to the thing you
I'm
said
asking
earlier?
you the
Like
question.
no,
You
I said
never answered. I'm saying,
even if
what do
I
you think created the
even if I could
universe?
see
How would you describe
even
it?
if I even if I could see the Big Bang theory, like that's the most that's let's say that I just go with that's the most brilliant theory and I'm like, sure, I'll just tertiarily accept that for now. That came from something like that was the
Yeah, and
singularity
what
that
is
was
that something that it came
material
from?
and the earliest makeups of the universe, uh, the earliest particles that could be in that area, the lighter elements and stuff that would have formed our later greater cosmos would have been in that area. I don't know what that would have been. Like I said, geology, not Big Bang cosmology. But you're saying that your dude showed up way before there was even matter, so it didn't matter um, what he's made of because he's not made of matter. Um, but cool. So what was
Well,
your next thing?
I'm taking the evidence for it leads. We start with a singularity that starts everything. What either caused the singularity or what was before the singularity? And you seem to just concede you don't know, which is fine. But I'm trying to
Right.
ask you, what do you think it is? What does the evidence
For
say? What
me?
is the logical conclusion?
Oh, I like I said, I didn't go to school for Big Bang cosmology. I could give a shit. I think if it came from like another set, if we were just a bubble that we have relative time that we exist in a flux of existence where we're an offshoot from another uh, universe cosmos, multiverse, it don't mean a shit to me. Like it's not going to affect my existence one way or another about that stuff. Um, like if physics made us, physics doesn't, demand worship.
Well, I mean, again, regardless of, I think again, it logically follows that we can follow the evidence to where it leads and look to see. Well, wait, why did this singularity just come out of somewhere? You're saying it's not nothing, which I guess is good, but I already described what it has to be. Based on this again, this is based on science. This is based on the Big Bang that you said you accept. It's not matter. It's not space. It's not time. Everything you just mentioned there too was not matter, space, or time. So I don't know why, when I say an immaterial being of some sort, you somehow panic and say, no, no, that's not it. I mean, you literally just described it for me in just a different way. We can talk about the multiverse theory if you want and the problems with that, but I mean,
Talk about the what theory?
we can talk about the multiverse if you want, but we're going to go back to the same point of what caused the multiverse, what is it? We got to go all the way back to the beginning. We can't just ignore all what the evidence says, which it seems like you're doing.
From this whole outset, the debate topic was, is belief in God rational, not whether or not the Big Bang had a cause and what the Big Bang was made of. So I don't know where, once again, I don't know why the debate has to go to, oh, I don't know where unicorns come from. Like we don't need that because it's not the topic of God. So if we can go to why belief in God is rational without saying, well, you don't know this, and so therefore I'm going to put this here until we know it. There's no other reason to go back to the Big Bang.
I'm using logic to get us someplace, and I believe logic is rational. And so I think I'm being criticized for using logic.
No,
and science, right? You think science is rational, right? You said you trust in things, experimental evidence. So I'm using the science, the data, the experimental evidence that you say you trust in, and taking it to a logical, philosophical conclusion. And you're telling me, well, we don't need to do that. And I'm very confused why we don't need to use logic if we want to be rational.
I think you put a bunch of words in a bowl and you tossed it, and you said, I'm going to make this sentence right now. But again, the debate topic was whether or not believing God is rational, and so that's
and I'm trying to get you to understand.
You're saying that we hold on. You're saying that we cannot address whether belief in God is rational if we do not know where we came from. Is that your claim right now?
No, my claim is just proving the cosmological argument.
We have no.
We're going through this, and I'm taking it back to its logical conclusion. We can go through another argument if you want to, but
we have no reason to go back to the Big Bang because of the belief in God is rational. So then what is your next thing on why you think belief in God is rational?
Well, okay, we can move on from that, but I think it is a very important question because I'm using the evidence to lead to the conclusion of a possible godlike being, right? So it's not like, okay, this is not related. No, I'm using evidence and following it to logical conclusion. But we can look at other arguments. We could look at the teleological argument, fine-tuning argument of. We have various amounts of cosmological, various amount of constants in the universe that need to be exactly the way they are, or else the universe doesn't exist. And so the question is how did this probabilistically come randomly, right? And I can go through the specific numbers for you.
An argument from a probability is fallacious. So anything to say that this doesn't seem probable or it doesn't matter. Just because it doesn't seem probable, doesn't seem likely, doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. And you're right. Like I accept that the cosmos is likely 13.67 billion years old, and our Earth is roughly 4.4 billion years old. That's a lot of fours that could fit in that 13.6 to 7 billion years. So yeah, there was a lot of time when there was no sun, there was no Earth, and there were likely other formations that failed. There were likely nebula that never led to a sun. There were likely suns that collapsed into black holes. There were probably a whole host of things, and eventually we got here. So I mean, I don't. Just because it's probabilistically that it's X, Y, and Z, I always find it funny. People are like, oh, what's the probability of life and all this other stuff? And it's like, what's the probability of uncaused, immaterial, non-spatial, non-everything deity existing? What's that probability? What's the number on that spreadsheet? Who brought out the abacus for that one?
Well, I find it kind of interesting that you're minimizing the question of if we're saying that something that was highly improbable, and I mean, we can get to the numbers. We're talking orders of 10 to like, the 300 power numbers that we don't even comprehend. An
Do you
event of
accept you're
occurring,
made of
we would
atoms?
logically say, hey, this is an extremely rare event. What happened? Did it happen randomly by chance? Or maybe there's some type of design in here. Maybe there's some type of
Well,
purpose
there.
in such a thing. And to give you an example, hold on, to give you an example, um, real quick, I can go through the critical density in the universe is 1 to the 10 and the 15th, right? This is what it needs to be for the universe to even exist. To give you and give the audience a visual of what that is, that's if you had $10 trillion in pennies, you painted one penny red, and you pulled out that penny out of the stack correctly. Now, if somebody did that, I think we would all say, no, they knew where the penny was. We would understand that this was a planned event, that this is
Well,
probably not going to happen randomly. And so
in
when we
the
see
words
this
of
and
Jim
notice this is our
Carrey,
universe, and we ask
so you're
ourselves
saying
why,
there's a chance. It doesn't matter. You're saying there's a chance. If
yeah,
there's a
but
chance, there's a
it's
chance. It will happen. It's an event. It's not a non-event because there's a chance. If there's a non-chance, then there's no chance of it happening. But because there's there's that probability, it is there. So yeah, you can hem and haw that says that, oh, someone may reach in and they could be cheating, but if it happens, it happens. I mean, that's just what it
and
is.
why,
I will ask
again,
this,
it's
Josh,
reasonable.
are you
Hold on,
made of
it's
atoms? Are
reasonable
you
to
made of
ask
atoms?
these
Are you
questions.
made of atoms? Are you made of atoms?
But hold on, before I answer that
Are you
question,
made
we
of
are made of
atoms?
atoms, but it's rational
Okay.
and reasonable to ask these
Are
questions.
atoms life or
You're
non-life?
asking, you're acting as if we shouldn't ask these questions. How dare you? It doesn't matter. But this is what the sciences lead, and this is what physicists are asking. So I don't know why this is so
Are
irrational and this is so off topic for you.
because no, I said it's fallacious because arguments from probability are fallacious. Like if you want to make fallacious arguments, that's on you, but that's not on me. I was just telling you
But
that arguments
proof
from
that's
probability.
fallacious, though. I'm very
I
interested in that.
I can like you can look up what is the list of fallacious arguments, and arguments from probability is one of them.
I'm not necessarily arguing from probability. I'm just
Hey, you
asking
said
what is more
you said
rational to
the
believe.
probability. No, you said the probability of this happening is so exponentially x. That's an argument from probability. Whether or not you
No,
accept
I'm
that,
asking the
that's on
question
you.
of is this a random event or what happened with this? That's what I'm asking. We observed an event that happened, and we're asking, will this happen randomly, or did this happen in maybe more of a planned thing? And we're using logic to maybe think, what seems more likely, what seems more rational, what seems more logical to us. I'm not
For
arguing from
me,
probability. Sure, it might be possible that it's a random chance, but what is more
for
rational to
me,
believe?
life is natural. So you just said you accept you're made of atoms. Are atoms living or non-living matter?
I don't know. Atoms are not living. But I don't know
You
what that
don't
has to do with.
you don't know if atoms are living or non-living?
No, I said atoms are non-living, but I don't
Okay.
know what that has to do with the topic.
So because you're made of non-life. If atoms are non-living, they're non-life. You are non-life. You are non-life made life. So your earlier assertion that life can't come from non-life is absurd on its face because you accept that you're made of non-living material. We have examples of organic molecules. We have examples of earlier precursor forms, and we have a really good understanding of evolution through genetics and the fossil record to show that we came from other existing material. So, like, to say that probability it could never happen, we have the evidence to show that it happens. Like, it doesn't matter how
Well, no, I never
crazy the
said it
numbers are.
didn't. It didn't happen. I said it's a miracle from life coming, non-life coming from life. That
I don't say it's miraculous.
it's a miracle. We can get the definition of miracle if you want, but it's something that science hasn't been able to explain. and we can rationally ask and answer and say, "Hey, what's the rational explanation? What's the logic behind this?" It's not
Yeah,
unreasonable
well,
to say that.
I don't know what you have and haven't read, so I'm not going to put it on there. But like the theory of abiogenesis is a really good explanation for where life came from. I don't know if you're unawares, but whether or not it started from hydrothermal vents or whether it was silica in shale deposits that protected organic molecules. You know that we may or may not ever find that out. But you know, we have a really good understanding of where it logically leads that life came from. But your assertion is that we don't, or that you're unaware of it.
I'm asserting again. I'm asking the same question that we can ask with all of these fundamental constants. Let's look at the probabilities of them, and let's say what is more likely to have happened. And it's interesting you bring abiogenesis up because when we try to do this in the lab, we fail miserably. So it's not even a repeatable experiment. Yet you still somehow dismissing the question of, hey, maybe this is a little bit more complex than what we think. Maybe if we can't do it in the lab and it's very highly improbable, maybe we can ask ourselves what is the other conclusions to how this
That's
happens,
awesome.
how this formed.
So you're saying if we can't replicate it in the lab, it's probably a bad idea to say that this is likely how it started.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Oh,
But you
you're not
mentioned
saying
before
that. You're not
that
saying that. Okay,
you
because we
trust things that
do
are
have those
repeatable.
experiments.
No, no,
We
no.
do
You
have
said
that.
you trust things that are repeatable, and then there's an
We have.
unrepeatable event that you somehow trust. Sounds like
So
faith to me. Sounds a little
have you heard of the
irrational to
Miller?
me.
Have you heard of the Miller-Urey experiment? It's been repeated. I mean, like where RNA was forming in on shale. Like, are you that like that's been duplicated at least once, right? And then there's other. I don't even know what you want to call them off the top of my head. One guy I was talking on Tangelo about. He was the one that was coming up with a theory that they came out of silica precipitation from hydrothermal vents that protected organic molecules. And I mean, I'm not sure where you want to go with this. People that are in this field that are doing this, um, and so they at least have more than an understanding of it.
Yeah, so if you look at the Miller-Urey experiment, it doesn't exactly mimic what was going on in the Earth and the exact conditions of the primordial Earth. So, I mean, sure, it happens in a lab. That could be great, but is it the real explanation of what happened, considering the fact this is not the
Well,
same
where
condition of the Earth at the
where was
time?
the lab? Where was the lab that they created a universe from nothing, so that we can know that that was an option?
Well, this is the question we're
They
asking.
haven't
Yeah,
been able to do it in a
how did
lab.
that happen? I never said it came from
Yeah,
nothing, by the way. But
you
you
did.
somehow think that
Your
an
guts.
immaterial being is out of the picture, yet you listed several things that are outside of space, time, and matter yourself. So I'm very
No, I
confused
didn't.
what you're even
When did
trying to
I?
say.
When did I ever? What did I say exists out of space, time, and matter? I never said that.
Well, you said something about the multiverse. Is the multiverse the same thing that makes up the universe itself? Is that what you're trying to
This,
say?
if it, well, if there's a multiverse, which I was like, if that's the case, the multiverse would still be made of matter, and it would have just spit matter our way. I never said it would have been, and that would have, and I said relative time because that was time relative to us, but there would have been non-relative time, which would have been time with that universe or those colliding multiverses, whatever it was that shot shit our way. Like they would have had relative time, to them, and then it could have offshot ours. But no, I mean, I never, I never once have I asserted like non-matter, immaterial, non-spatial things created things like that. That was you, not me.
Look, if you want to go to the multiverse theory, it's very easy to trace back what caused the multiverse or create the multiverse. You're just going to go backwards to infinite regress. I mean, we could go there, and we're going to come to the
No,
same
yeah,
spot. What created the
no.
multiverse? What's creating all the universes? Like,
Well, I don't. Again, we don't have to do that because the debate is whether or not belief in God is rational, and you still think that for somehow, if we don't have a theory of everything, we cannot therefore say that there is not a God. But you think just because you have this question mark, we can assert a God and say this God therefore has to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal, loving, vengeful, wrathful, take Sundays off, all this other stuff. You tack that onto this thing, whatever you want to do. But you again, you've never provided evidence once, and all you've done, well, you can't explain this, so therefore it has to be my explanation. You had never
Again,
evidenced
that's
that
not
your
the
explanation is
total
possible.
evidence of what the conclusions of the Big Bang are, right? So then we ask the questions and we go to a logical conclusion. I'm using the evidence to get to this idea of a potential God or godlike thing that we haven't really described in anything out of the ordinary. We basically said, hey, everything started at a point, so what started that thing? And for some reason, to you, that's not an important question. I'm using my rationale to get there. So I don't know. I don't know. We could go on to another argument if you want to, but I'm just looking at the science and saying, hey, the science is
Oh,
saying this. What's that? What's before that? How did we
I
get there from
mean,
there?
again, if you were looking at the science wouldn't say, how do we get here from there? We don't know, therefore, a timeless, spaceless, immaterial thinking agent that knew how to create everything. But I digress. What else do you have that would lead us to belief in God as rational? Because I'm
Yeah,
still unconvinced so far.
I can go into my
Preach it,
next
preach.
argument, but you
Please
kind
go
of
ahead.
just asserted something isn't true, and then you saying that that's the case, which you accused me of doing earlier. But anyway, um, we can go on. We could go on to the moral argument, which is obviously a big debate. I think essentially, if there's an objective morality that exists, there has to be some type of foundation in that morality that's above human opinion, right? So
I
if
don't think
we
there is.
believe that any type of moralism is true, then we're going to have to figure out where that comes from. And to say that
I
it
don't.
comes
I
from
don't think there
nowhere
is.
leads to some absurd conclusions. So,
I well, survey says I don't say morality is objective. It's a full stop.
okay. So,
It is subjective. Hold on, you get to speak. Let me speak. So
yeah.
it's not objective, it's subjective. Even if your deity existed, it would be subjective upon that deity's opinion. And depending on which deity that you're asserting existed, we could look at anything that undergirds its existence. Like I could look at Christianity in forms where the God of the Bible has said, "Thou shalt not kill," and then "Thou shalt go and slaughter all the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Moabites." Like that just because he decrees you can't do this instance. He says that all but this vagary, because it's not, thou shalt not commit murder. This is just killing because I say you can do it. It's therefore good. So let's not him and haw about it. But I mean, the other thing is like we do understand that people make different choices. If morality was objective, everyone would have the same morality everywhere, but we don't have that. We have people that make bad decisions, we have people that make good decisions, and the only reason that we view them as good as bad because as a society or as an individual they would be bad. I personally think it would be bad to beat for someone to beat their wife. Some men out there we know don't think that way. And if it was up to me, and if I'm in that situation where I see a man hit another woman, regardless of the situation, I would step in morally by my own moral standard. Other people may not. So if you're just going to sit there and flippantly, once again, just decree that there is moral objectivity and we're just going to have to move on, I say it's not. I say it's subjective. And you can go with it how you like. But
Well, yeah. So we can. We can talk about the subjective morality. I noticed you mentioned euphemism is one essentially of God. We can circle back to that, but with the subjective morality, if you really think morality is subjective, that means that really nothing is right or wrong. It's just a matter of human opinion, correct?
one of my favorite quotes is from William Shakespeare's "Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so." There are things that I just objectively, will, regardless of if I, as long as I am me, will think is wrong. Harming people for any reason other than self-defense would be wrong by my moral standard. So if someone says, no, my moral standard is no, I can, hurt people that regardless of their intention. then it's up to me and my moral standard to stand in their way if I want to. Like, but it's not some signposts on the wall, because you could watch plenty of those shows, What Would You Do? And you see someone sitting there being like either super racist or super abusive to their kids, and time and time again people will sit there and say nothing. Some of them might even be like, hey, it'll get okay, or it'll be better, or and they won't do anything to stop it. And then you'll get people that stop it because their moral compass is a different way than those other people, just showing subjectivity, not objectivity.
Okay, so would you say something like raping a child is only wrong based on human opinion?
I personally say it is. I won't. There are plenty of pedophiles out there, child rapists out there who would have this conversation with you that would probably say that they don't think it is that way. But for me, I say it should always be the case that if you harm a child, if we put dogs down for biting and scarring a kid once, and someone who molested a child scars a kid for a lifetime, they should be put down just like dogs. I our
But that's just your opinion, right?
comes
That's
us.
not really anything
Sure.
you should
Yeah,
listen
that's
to,
my
right?
opinion. Because again, moral subjective. I don't think for me it's always going to be the case that harming kids is bad. So I will hold that. But someone out there may have a moral thing, and it's up to me to stand in that way.
Yeah.
And
So I think most people would intuitively recognize that things such as rape, murder, are always wrong, regardless of who does it, regardless if everyone votes to say that it's okay, that it's wrong. Um, interesting example that we could use. The lawyer Robert Jackson in the Nuremberg trials. The Nazis would argue and say, "Hey, we were just following orders. We were just doing what our culture told us to do. We didn't do anything wrong." But Robert Jackson said, "Well, no, there's a law above the law. There's a law above human opinion that says that what you did is wrong. There's an objective standard that says no matter what your society tells you to do, it's wrong." I think that's intuitive and rational because
I wouldn't
we
have argued it.
see, yes, not everyone lives by the same law, but we do see
Yeah.
and can then recognize
Well,
that
I mean,
raping a child is always wrong. Um,
when
Murdering
I
someone's always
when I
wrong,
was
regardless of what everyone says
when I
about it.
was
Now you're
when I
saying it
was in the
doesn't,
army
and that's
when I
fine.
was in the
But I
army.
just don't think that's a
Yeah.
rational take. So
When I was in the army, you're given orders. And when you're given orders by a commissioned officer or a non-commissioned officer, they're considered lawful orders. But there are instances of unlawful orders where people can give you orders to, kill civilians or do things that are not in accordance to what us or the Geneva Convention or the UN says that we should be doing. And we have a right to say we're not going to do that. And you can be hemmed up, you can be beaten, you can be imprisoned, and then you can be put on trial. But when we have multiple instances where soldiers have been found that they were not following unlawful orders and were absolved of their punishment, and their commanding officers were the ones that were hemmed up by it. I mean, Trump pardoned some people for committing war crimes, but there was a whole system in place to say that what you did was wrong, and we're going to object to we're going to do that because we set up that standard. By our standard, by our subjective standard, this was wrong. So
yeah, I think we have and most people would agree. I think we'd have a moral obligation or duty to do what was objectively right, regardless of the orders that were given. Um, I mean, I'm glad that you're admitting that you think everything's subjective, but I don't think that's really rational in what we see in reality. And I would also propose if you probably don't even live your that way yourself, if someone stole from you or murdered a loved one, I'm sure you
yeah,
would
no, I
do
I
everything you
was I
could
was
to
in
enforce
I
that
was doing it. I
morality,
was doing.
that
Hold on.
immorality.
You like to talk a lot. I was doing a geology talk for some at a university, and some middle school kids came through, and I was showing them fossils. And I had a mosasaur tooth that I collected myself, and one of the kids stole it, and it was just like, hey, that sucks that kid took it. But the only thing I can think is maybe that kid is going to now, have a pursuit into paleontology and knowledge because, he stole something from me. It sucks. You have stuff that's stolen from me. Somebody could try to kill me. That's fine by me. It is what it is, and survival of the fittest will take over after that. But I mean, again, you keep waving away saying, "Oh, everyone agrees to this," and they don't. Like that's why there's child molesting priests. That's why there's that's why the prison population is mostly religious people. Is because if you declare that these things are just morally objective, they got the wrong object.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, child molesting priests, all this other stuff. According to you, they did nothing wrong, so I don't know why
No,
there's any
no,
moral
no, no,
objection.
no. Once again, don't put things in my mouth. I said from my moral standard is they did something wrong. So fuck.
According to you, they did nothing wrong. Exactly.
To be fair, go fuck yourself if you think that I would say that anyone who molested a kid did nothing wrong. Those words never come out of my mouth.
It's just a matter of opinion, according to your
No, I said
that it's wrong.
From the outset, I said from me, it is always wrong. Harming a child will always be wrong.
Yeah, but that's just your opinion.
But don't say, and that is my opinion. So I said it's wrong. Yeah. So for me, I am the arbiter of my world and my morality, not you and not your non-existent, non-spatial, non-timeless deity. So I don't know what you're trying to get on, but don't put your words on me. Like,
well, no, I'm just saying.
Unlike your God, if I saw someone try to molest a kid, I would stop it. But you're omnipresent, all-knowing, dude does nothing while millions of kids have been molested throughout time and more. But we could talk about.
Well, first off, I never claimed a specific God, but
honestly,
that's interesting. But anyway, again, your opinion is that things are wrong, but it's just your opinion. It's not actually wrong. It's just whatever.
It's
right. It's like your flavor of ice cream. You like vanilla ice cream. Someone likes chocolate. It's not really wrong. You think it's wrong. You told yourself it's wrong, but in the grand scheme of things, just a matter of your opinion, and that's fine. You can have that opinion, but now it's interesting how you mentioned. I guess you were talking about the Christian God. I mean, I guess we could get into that, but I'm just trying to prove theism in general. We could, we could get into that. We could shift the conversation if we want to, but I never mentioned anything about a Christian God at all. So interesting you brought that up.
From the outset, this thing was whether or not belief in God is rational, and then we went to other areas. But what time are we getting into the audience Q&A, or are we still?
I mean, we can start the Q&A if y'all are finished. If y'all want to continue, y'all can continue. Are y'all wrapped up?
I mean, yeah, I have other arguments, but we can wrap it up. It's it's. I'll let the audience decide what you guys want to do.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I have other arguments, but we can wrap it up because we could be here all night.
Okay. Well, y'all can do your closing statements first. If you have a closing statement, GFT, I guess you'd start that one because he went first last time.
Sure. I want to thank, it was a short notice. Things got changed. I want to thank Debate and Relax for hosting the debate at the last minute. And Brandon Pienaar over here. I want to thank Josh for giving us this time. Thank you for giving us a window into your thoughts. I do appreciate it. And other than that, I still find unmoved that I still think belief in a non-integer is, for the cause of everything, is an irrational thought. That regardless of how much we might assert that this thing is undergirded by the laws of physics, the laws of nature, all this other stuff, but just for right now, we're going to hold to it that as a god until we get those laws ironed out. It's just hedging our bets, and it would be irrational to say that it exists because of that. But that'd be me.
Okay, cool. Josh.
Yeah, so I'll keep it quick. Yeah, so basically to summarize what I'm saying is I'm using science, I'm using evidence, using different philosophical arguments to take whatever evidence we have and lead it to its conclusion, such as the cosmological argument. We're looking at, well, what created and started the universe? Why is everything so fine-tuned in the teleological argument? If there's at least one objective morals that we say is above our human opinion, well, who created those morals? Um, I do think immaterial things exist, such as laws of logic, such as thoughts and things like that, that we can't really physically describe. So to say that there's an immaterial being that perhaps is responsible for this universe, I don't think is unreasonable or irrational at all. We didn't get into the cosmic conscious argument, but consciousness itself cannot be explained with science alone. Um, and like I said, we're having new. We didn't get to this as well, but we have new information about digital physics that says, hey, a virtual state, a virtual world is actually more representative and actually represents our world a little bit better, and whatnot. And that implies that, well, there has to be some type of computer programmer behind that. Um, but lastly, I think the key takeaway is that when you get into either ignoring these questions or you take the philosophical conclusions of atheism or subjective morality, you get to some pretty meaningless and absurd conclusions that, I mean, you could swallow the pill if you want to, but I think intuitively and rationally it doesn't always follow or make sense that that's really the case. Um, and then lastly, I do want to thank everyone who set up this debate and for inviting me. I want to thank God for all the time. I appreciate him being here and giving his time and his effort into this. And I just want to thank everyone for this, and I'm ready for questions or whatever we have next. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and I'd also thank you both for coming. We appreciate it over here. And yeah, if anybody wants to come up and ask a question on their stances, you can do that now. Probably gonna do one at a time. All right, Reborn, hello.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's nice to see you again, Godfather. Love you, buddy. You did great. My question is towards Josh MVP. Do you understand what a quark is?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain what a quark is?
I believe it's very simply just one of the fundamental particles that we have that form protons, neutrons.
Right. So, do you think that before Earth, we are unable to prove that quarks existed?
Before Earth
Creation of the universe?
I think what you're trying to say is the fact that quark exists. Did that fact exist before human opinion? Is that what you're trying to ask?
What I'm trying to ask is essentially, do you believe that before the universe, that quarks existed or not?
No. The evidence does not suggest that at all.
Gotcha. Okay. My question's over.
Thank you. All right, Raya. Can you hear us, Raya? I'm not sure she can hear us. I'll bring Neon up too.
Hey, am I good?
Yeah, I can't hear you, Ferry. I can hear Neon, but I can't hear Ferry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. I can
Okay,
hear you.
okay, Raya, we can't hear you, so we're gonna let Neon go real quick, and then you can go after him if we can hear you.
If there's an immaterial world, does that just mean it's not made of materials, like atoms, for example?
Yeah, everything we define as matter
Okay,
had a
then,
big beginning.
then what is this immaterial component to God?
It's interesting. Well, we know immaterial things exist, such as consciousness itself is kind of an immaterial thing we can't describe. I mentioned thoughts. I mentioned laws of logic and laws of math. They exist. We don't necessarily can't see them or touch them. So something of that nature, that same nature. I know Godfather Time mentioned category, which was actually, I think it was a good word. Classification. Something of that category classification exists outside of the singularity part of the Big Bang.
So God is a category, or he has the nature of a category.
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know if I'm using the term category, but I'm just using immaterial itself is a category of things. There's a category of things called immaterial
Sure.
that we can describe. That's all I'm saying.
Well, what can you describe about it other than it's conceptual and you don't actually understand how to engage? That's like non-tangible. What can you describe about it if it's non-tangible?
Well, yeah, it is very difficult to describe it, which
Then why is it
the hard
rational
part
to
of it.
believe?
But I'm not sure what the
If it's
when you-
difficult to describe, if it's not something where it's tangible or engageable, then why is it more rational to believe in that?
because there had to be, again, unless we want to say the universe came out of nothing, you could say that, but that's a very bold claim. That's very irrational because we don't
No,
see
it's
that.
not
We've never
either
seen that.
nothing or God. God has.
Well, no, I'm just describing what the thing is. I think what you're doing
You're
is
just
you're
telling me it's not
projecting.
made of materials and it's not made of anything tangible and it's not anything you can
Yeah.
describe. What is it?
Well, I'm doing again. It's before space, time, and matter, so it's outside of those things. It made a personal choice to
It's
create,
not
and so
space.
we're developing this philosophical concept of a God that is hard to describe. Yes, it's very hard to describe a immaterial being, especially from our worldview, since we're made out of materials. But I don't understand the problem with that. Saying that.
Why should I believe that something is rational if you can't even describe it?
Again, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And again, we're going just with logical conclusions.
So
So just because I can't describe something, just because I can't describe to you exactly what a thought is, doesn't mean it's irrational for me to say that thoughts exist.
a thought is an impulse of neurons. I can
Okay,
describe what a thought is using a material substrate if you really want me to. I probably couldn't tell you exactly which thoughts because I'm not like a neurologist and I don't think that we have the trillions of synapses mapped out like that, right? But if you want to say that a thought is like this immaterial concept, I'm just going to reject that because every time a thought is iterated, we see a string of neurons iterate.
So are you just taking a stance that immaterial things don't exist? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking you to describe what you mean by the immaterial world.
Yeah, I
You're
gave you the best
saying
description
that-
I can of it.
Well, you're saying you can't describe it.
No, I'm
And
doing the
you're
best
saying
I can. Again, it's outside
you're
of
saying
what
that
we know
even though-
as
you're
typical
saying that-
baryonic matter.
and you're saying that even though you can't describe it, then that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But until you can describe it, we're at an impasse because you could be describing anything, logical or not. You haven't outlined a positive attribute.
Well, hold on. Can you explain to me how the conclusion is illogical? It logically cannot happen.
It's not illogical. It's just not verifiable, right?
It just doesn't
If you're saying this thing doesn't exist, but you can't give it any positive attributes.
Okay, but the other options aren't verifiable either. So where do we go? Do we just sit there and do nothing?
You remain agnostic and say that, well, it's not more rational to believe in a God because you can't describe it. You can't outline in what ways it exists if it's immaterial. You remain agnostic.
Well, again, when you put all the arguments together, it's not irrational. First of all, it's not irrational to make a decision based on the evidence that we have. Just because you don't think we have enough evidence doesn't mean it's irrational to make a conclusion of it.
We can't.
Secondly, when you put all the arguments together, we're now building more evidence toward at least a logical possibility of something. So if it's logically possible, I don't see how it's irrational.
Because it's something you can't describe. So
what? If I was blind, I couldn't describe a banana. Doesn't mean a banana doesn't exist.
Josh, to ask about something regarding evidence for a thing you can't describe would be like saying that falsely that vaccines cause autism and this particular chemical is what causes the autism. Right? You're putting the cart before the horse. How can I have evidence of something that you can't even describe?
Again, a banana can exist, and I just can fail to describe it. I don't understand what your point is.
Okay, then I can't engage with the concept.
You don't want to engage with the concept. That's fine. You have the right to do that, but it doesn't. What you're saying doesn't logically follow. What you're basically saying is because someone can't describe something, it's irrational to believe. But I could just never describe to you what a banana is, but a banana can still exist, and it
I
can
would
still
hope.
be possible. And
I
I'm
would
telling
hope
you, hey,
that-
well, there's other immaterial things, so this other thing is immaterial as well.
I would
So
hope.
I'm doing the best language to use to describe it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist though. So
I would
I
hope
don't see
that.
I see flaw in your logic. You can choose not to believe it. That's fine, but I
Sure.
don't see how this is irrational.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's just yet to be demonstrated that in any way is even an argument. I mean, we're not even at an assertion other than the things that God is not. He is not material. He is spaceless. He is timeless.
I mean, I think it's a pretty big
Hey,
assertion.
hey, Josh and Neon, I'm going to go ahead and let the next person up, and then we can have an open discussion afterwards, if y'all don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry, Neon. Thank you, Neon.
No worries.
Go.
There
Can you
you
guys
go.
hear me?
Yeah.
So I was gonna ask, if we have free will, why did God harden Pharaoh's heart? And that's to Josh.
If we have free will, why did God harden Pharaoh's heart?
Yeah,
That's the
is
question.
that impeding on his? Yeah, is that not impeding on his free will?
Well, there's a couple ways to answer the question. I think one answer could be that hardening someone's heart isn't an actual literal term of God hardening their heart. It could also just be a descriptive term. So, yeah, that I hardened this person's heart could just be a saying that I say, but I didn't actually do it. So there's that aspect of it. Another way of looking at it is that Pharaoh freely chose for his heart to be hardened, right? So he said, I'm going to harden my heart, and then God allowed it for his heart to be hardened, or he hardened his heart. But if Pharaoh had said, no, I'm not going to harden my heart, then God wouldn't have been able to harden his heart. So there's one way to look at it. So those are the two answers I would give, particularly for that specific instance.
Wait, so God or Pharaoh asked God to harden his heart, or
He could
I
have,
haven't read the
right?
verse.
Because, he could have. And the reason why I say that is because God has essentially, the Christian God you're referring to, has essentially promised to not interfere with our free will.
Is that
And
an
that's a key
interpretation thing?
component of
Because
Christianity.
Yeah, go
Exodus
ahead, Godfather.
9:12 says, but what was I say? Is that an interpretation thing? Because Exodus 9:12 says, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not listen
Right.
to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said to Moses. So the Lord said to Moses, he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. But you're saying somehow in that Pharaoh told God to harden his heart, or this
No,
verse is wrong.
so in that passage, like I said in the second verse, God could have told Pharaoh something. Pharaoh says no, and then God let his heart and drove his heart to be hardened because he already rejected him.
So he did harden his heart, but didn't ask for it.
No, I'm saying he could have very well told Pharaoh do this, and Pharaoh
Oh,
said
so that
no, I'm
you're
not going to
saying
do this,
you're saying
and his
we need
heart
to
was
read between the
hardened because
lines.
of it, because he chose to be hardened. What'd you say,
You're
Godfather?
saying because you're saying we need to read between the lines, because I mean, even though we read the verse before it, the magicians did not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and on all of the Egyptians, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. So you're saying it's not written between verse 11 and verse 12, but somewhere between the boily magicians, God could have told him something and it just wasn't written
Right.
down. Potentially, that's what you're saying. It could have. This is a It's So
And this,
story.
I mean, yeah, the statement isn't necessarily to be taken literally, but I think what you're trying to get at is this doctrine of Calvinism, which is a whole different thing. I mean, if we really wanted to get into Calvinism, we could. But me personally, not being a Calvinist, I don't interpret the passage that way, and many other sects don't interpret it that way either. So this is not a personal opinion here. This is kind of a theological question or debate that's been happening for a while of what that verse means.
Yeah, and this leads me to my next point. Like, is it then justifiable if people are interpreting it in different ways and some people see it as contradicting for them to go to hell because they do not believe that this book is real or it's right because it's contradicting everything it says? Is it justifiable for them to go to hell? Like, it's reasonable
Is
to
it,
look at this, interpret it a certain way, think it's contradicting, and be like, yeah, it's not real. Is it justifiable for them to go to hell then?
okay. So I got to flip your question. If you misinterpret this passage, I wouldn't say you go to hell, but I think you're kind of asking a deeper question of if you don't believe the Bible as a whole, is it justifiable to go to hell? Is that what you're asking?
So my my question is, it's things like this in the Bible where there are people that have different interpretations of it, and some people's interpretations may find it very contradicting, so hard to believe in. So then if they find it contradicting, they don't believe in the Bible. So they don't follow the Bible. Is it justifiable for them to go to hell then?
I mean, yeah, because God's standard of justice and what He does basically says that we've already are all deserving of going to hell. So the command that He laid out and the basic command of accepting Jesus in your heart as Lord and Savior. I mean, it's the lifeline that you need. So if we've done far worse than that, so we're already in the I guess the negative in that area of doing wrong by God's standard. So yeah, it would be justifiable because He doesn't even have to give us. He could send us all to hell and it would be justifiable. So yeah, it's justifiable.
All right, I just think my
Oh,
last point. It's what were you gonna say, Chase?
oh no, sorry.
Yeah, I just think that it's odd, like a God that's all knowing would make a book where not everybody is interpreting it the same and where that leads some people to not believe in it if he wants us to believe in him. Why wouldn't you make a book where we'd all interpret it the same and there wouldn't be contradictions to different people, which makes it harder to believe in him? I don't understand that, but that's
Well, I think you're presupposing that as humans, first off, that we have perfect interpretation. That's number one. We're flawed. So God could have
exactly.
made something very clear. I mean, God can even reveal Himself right now to everybody, and we could still deny it based on our own free choice. So what you're kind of asking is almost the somewhat impossible question of again, it violates the idea of free will. If God can do whatever He wants to do,
No,
but
I
we could still
understand that
reject
part.
Him. So no, but in terms of a perfect scripture, He could give us a perfect scripture, and we could still misinterpret it because we're essentially fallen creatures. So I'm not necessarily sure your scenario even exists. To be honest with you,
I'm
um,
trying to say, if he's all knowing, he should
Wait a
know
minute.
what it takes for everybody to believe in him. And even at that, and your own point, you said we're
yeah, but He
flawed.
doesn't. He
I
doesn't force
understand,
us
but
against
even
our will, right? So
yeah,
he
no,
could
I
he
know
could
that.
yeah. So
I
the
know.
only way so the only way we could believe is essentially if He forced us to believe, right? So, but He doesn't do that. Right.
I don't
So
believe it.
he could do something so miraculous and so amazing that, okay, dang, we know that's God, but then now He's forcing our will, and then He's not a loving God, and He's also not demanding love for us. So the
According to
reason why
the
we are
verses we
free
just read,
creatures is because
uh,
He wants us to love Him back. He wants us to freely choose Him, not
You
us be
said,
His robots and His
Josh,
slaves.
I
Right?
understand, Josh. You said in your own point that we're flawed creatures and we're just human. Yet you're saying it's justifiable if somebody misinterprets the book, which then leads them not to want to follow the book because it does not seem real, for us to go to hell. But that's just my whole point. That just doesn't add up to me,
No,
right?
what I'm trying to say is that we already deserve to go to hell anyway, regardless of our
Okay.
interpretation of not. So that's my point to be with that. But I think the key point takeaway from your line of questioning is that in order for us to fully believe 100%, God would have to violate our free will concept, but He doesn't want robots, right? So He didn't make a book that we would automatically follow because we'd be robots. And he also doesn't do things to force us to believe in him, or else we'd be robots. So
All right, I don't want to take up anybody else's time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ray. All right, Zen.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So Godfather time, can you describe to me what rationality is on your view?
Say again?
Can you describe to me what rationality is on your view?
I mean, like are you saying like a generic definition or just what I would call rationality?
However you're using the term for the sake of this debate, to say like belief in God is rational or not rational or whatever. What does rational actually
Sure.
mean?
Well, for me, like, rational? Like, I'll just look it up real quick. Colloquially, is the quality of being based on or in accordance with reason or logic. So,
Mhm.
we could, I would just say whatever we would have background to understand, it'd be rational to accept that, and it'll be irrational to say that I don't have an instance of this there, but
Okay.
I'll believe it until I
Is
prove it
that
wrong.
is that standard of rationality, like using the laws of logic, is that universal or is that just subjective to the individual?
I mean, it depends on the interlocutor. Probably, I would imagine. I don't think like just since everything's kind of subjective, we're not all created equal, right? As far as I'm concerned. So yeah, you would probably have different people that accept things based on a lower, higher
So
bar.
then
of
couldn't
standards.
Josh just say it's his subjective view that God is real and that's rational on his view, and you would have no real rebuttal to it since it's just a subjective interpretation of what rational means?
I mean, for as far as his experience, I would be able to say that for the sake for him, he would be within his means of accepting whatever he did. But I would still find it irrational to accept it. So it would be like in his worldview, it's one way, but he exists within reality, which reality finds a God irrational. So I mean, I'm not, I
You're
wouldn't be
saying
here
that
to take
there's an
someone's.
objective. Wait, you said reality finds God irrational? Is that what you said?
Oh yeah, see, in the greater scheme of reality, I find God irrational versus
You find God
one's
irrational,
personal
but
scheme.
is
Yeah,
God objectively irrational in reality?
I we would have to probably go definitionally. I mean, if someone defines God as a ham sandwich, whatever, but if someone has a set of features like Josh was getting at, timeless, spaceless, immaterial things, like I wouldn't say that those gods would be rational in reality.
But you, like, just to be clear, you saying you wouldn't find it irrational is not actually an argument. It's just you kind of giving your opinion, right?
But I would give reasons for it. Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of discourse, right? Is I would propose why it would be irrational, and whether or not people accept it would be the point. Like,
Okay, but ultimately it is
yeah.
arbitrary. So on your view, though,
I don't think so.
is it rational on your
There's,
view to believe in rationality itself?
I have no reason not to.
But is it rational? Like, is there a reason or a logical basis for the existence of rationality?
I mean, well, what are we going to say if we say rationality is an observation of things that leads us to positive conclusions? Then throughout the history of life, uh, they have made reasonable inferences, and some of them have been wrong. Like surely species or certainly individuals within populations have died due to wrong reasoned logic. They didn't judge a fall, or they went in a direction they thought they were need go, and went into a wildfire. It could be a number of things, and
So okay, but there's got to be some precondition to rationality or the capacity for rationality, not just in our own minds, but in the world as it exists. So, are you
I
capable of
don't think so. Like, why
rationally?
would you say that?
You don't think there's a
Wouldn't
precondition for rationality?
not like we evolved rationality, like and other like
So that's a
rationality is
precondition
just
then.
is no
Precondition is
like
evolution.
like well, I mean, technically, it'd just be organic molecules would have been necessary.
So then, wouldn't it be then
and
rational
really-
for somebody to evolve to just believe in God?
Well, I think some people would argue that there might be a societal or individualistic evolutionary gain from thinking something is watching over you, or that, you know, regardless of what you do, it's going to be in your corner. Yeah, the placebo effects work. We know that, you know, through, you know, medicine. So yes, there could be a positive societal gain by people having a joint idea, but it doesn't instantiate that idea is like real. They could all believe, like, what the group of people who believe that if they drank that Kool-Aid and their bodies were gonna, or their spirits were gonna ride a comet. That didn't mean that that happened. A lot of people believed that it was.
Okay, I'm not sure if that exactly answered what I was asking, but I'll just go with it. So observations and descriptions about the world from a scientific perspective are admittedly, and even on your view, provisional, subject to change in the future. There's nothing that we can, apparently there's nothing we can describe about the world that is absolute and true. So everything that
Oh, I
we
never said that.
observe and
When
we
did I say
and we
that?
believe. Okay, so you don't think that science is provisional? Like scientific descriptions are provisional?
Well, I think certainly we could have placeholders. Like I think, admittedly, earlier we were talking about the expansion of the universe, and tertiarily, I just hold that, uh, you know, dark energy and dark matter are the likely explanations for the
Likely, but you
acceleration of it.
admitted in
But
the
I don't know what that-
debate that anything that you're reasoning probabilistically is fallacious. It's not actually an argument. So when we're talking about,
No, I never said that. Did I say that?
yeah, you did. I heard you say it to Josh. You said anything that.
You did say that. You said my probabilistic view is a fallacy, and I wasn't trying to argue from probability.
No, argument from probabilities is saying that you're the probability.
Well, when you say this is more likely and
that
we'll use it as a
comprehension is a
placeholder for
problem.
now, that's probabilistic reasoning.
Well, no, that's because, like I said from the outset, I went to college for geology, so I didn't go to college for big bang cosmology. So all I'm doing is people did go through that field, they did put in the work, and so just tertiarily, I hold to what they are saying, but that it doesn't mean anything. When I put my head on my pillow at night, I'm not thinking, "Wow, thank you, dark matter, for accelerating the universe." Or when I wake
Right,
up,
well,
I
that's
don't go,
not
"Oh, I'm
exactly
so
what I'm
glad dark
asking,
matter's here."
though.
I don't do that.
I'm saying that given that scientific claims about the world and just the descriptions of the world, ultimately they can conclude things, but those conclusions are provisional, aka subject to change in the future,
But-
possibly. Now,
And
if
I was
that's
saying
the
that's not
case,
all fields,
if
and I
that,
don't know how you took
but if that,
as like,
no, that's the
it
case
has to
for
be this
any
field, it's supposed to be-
scientific description of the universe is provisional.
No, like we know things
Yeah,
like plate
yes.
tectonics is a thing. We know how plate
It's
tectonics work. We
provisional.
know
It's
that it
provisional.
works.
Yeah, but that's
No,
subject
like,
to change in the future.
says
Our
who?
understanding today
You?
could change tomorrow. Could it not?
When did you study plate tectonics?
Yeah, last night. I became an expert last
Oh,
night.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
so,
you stay at a Holiday
but
Inn? That's how you got an expert in plate tectonics? Like,
correct. Now, come on. It's
okay,
not about
but that
me and
doesn't
what I
mean
know.
anything.
It's
Yeah,
just this is the
yeah.
fact.
So, but
This
the
is
whole
the fact,
point is
though.
like
Listen,
there are
listen,
things that we
listen,
can
listen.
know, and it
Bro,
doesn't matter.
this
what
is how
the-
it works, though. This is how science works.
Oh,
Is
I'm
that
sure it is.
we can come to current understandings and make descriptions about the world, come to conclusions, but those conclusions are subject to change tomorrow if we discover new information. Correct?
There are things that I could assure you that we are not going to wake up tomorrow and plate tectonics is going to not be a thing. Like we're going to know that
You can
eventually the Earth's
believe that,
mantle
but is that belief
what
rational?
causes plate
Is that
tectonics.
belief rational?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, because
You
I
think it's
understand plate
rational?
tectonics.
On what basis is it rational and not probabilistic?
Because I understand plate tectonics.
Okay, but how does that follow that
It's
plate
knowledge.
tectonics won't change? How does that
Well,
follow
like I
that
said,
plate
this is
tectonics
my
won't change?
subjective thing. Whether or not you accept it or not, it doesn't mean
So
anything.
then there's no arguments
I
to be
just know
made
that is.
for or against rationality on your view. It's just an opinion.
But why would I have to make an argument about plate tectonics for you? Like I don't.
Well,
Your
that's just an
assertion
example that
all
you
things are
used.
provisional is just an assertion.
Well, it's literally a condition via the nature of science and how it works is that we observe things, we run experiments, and we come to conclusions about the world, but there's always a caveat in every
Right.
scientific experiment that this conclusion is subject to change in the future given new information if that does come about. That's not really arguable in terms of like a scientific perspective.
I think we're going to go round and round if we keep doing this. But you could say that everything's provisional, and that's your hill to die on. I can say that
It's the
we can know
hill that all
things.
scientists die on.
Okay,
don't
sure.
know.
What? Okay, I can keep talking, or you can just talk to yourself. Which would you like?
I know, but it's like you're trying to say, well, that's just your
Okay.
view. No, like literally, this is how
Yeah,
science works.
that's your view. So yes, no, that's your view. That like we cannot know things, or we cannot anywhere know things. I would
No,
know that
that's
we
not
do
what I
know
said.
things,
I said that
and that
scientific
it's
claims
not
are
all
provisional. So,
Cool.
okay, so
And
name me a scientific conclusion or claim about the world that is not provisional. Can you do that?
I would again go with like the plate tectonics, the theory of plate tectonics with orogenic events. We could that stuff is
So
not
you're
provisional,
saying
we
that
know this
given
stuff.
new information, what we've concluded thus far about plate tectonics will not change, correct?
It would not
We
change
understand
dramatically to where it would
everything.
be wrong.
But we understand
Yeah,
everything there is to know about plate tectonics. No,
yeah,
we don't.
I wouldn't know what new factors
So
you
our
would-
conclusions and
Okay.
our beliefs about plate
Another
tectonics is provisional. So I'm saying that ultimately any claim or conclusion you have about the world or any description you make about the world is probabilistic and a fallacy by your own standard. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Zen. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the next person.
Thanks for having me up.
Yep. JD's back. What's up, JD?
I'm back. I know. Godfather, I love you. I love you so much. I have another question for Josh. So the whole point of tonight's discussion was on whether or not God is the rational explanation for everything that we see and observe. I'd like to shift now. Do you think, Josh, that God is a rational being?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I do believe God's a rational being. There are actually arguments to prove that there has to be some type of sentience or rationality behind, for if you take further arguments down, not from the cosmological argument, but if you take further arguments down, it actually proves that there has to be some type of sensible, rational being who was responsible for the creation of the universe. And that's more in the digital physics type of argument, if you argue that the universe is a simulation. But from that argument, yes, I can say that. There's other reasons I would personally believe that, but that's the strongest scientific argument I have for that claim.
Okay. So we can agree that God is essentially a rational being, and just to re-propose this to you, when we say rational being, what we say is someone who is fairly consistent in their judgment. Correct?
I don't know if I agree with that definition.
What would be your definition of rational being?
Yeah, let's see. Get a good definition of it. Someone who is sensible and is able to make decisions based on intelligent thinking rather than emotion. That's my definition of a rational being.
Just read that definition one more time.
Someone who is sensible and is able to make decisions based on intelligent thinking rather than on emotions.
Oh, okay. So someone who's consistent in their judgment. Glad we can establish that.
Where did you hold on? Hold on. Where did you?
The point where you establish they're sensible.
Okay. Again, you're making a leap, and I know where you're. Hold on. You're making a leap. I know what question you're going to ask. You're going to ask: Is God's character and judgment rational? Is that what you're going to get at?
Absolutely, that's what I'm going to ask, and I would ask then how you would rebuttal that.
Yeah, I mean it is rational, and so are you trying to do from a Christian worldview, or are you trying to get me to say this from science? Because from a Christian worldview, there is an answer. There's a theological answer to this. There's no philosophical or scientific answer I can give you.
No, what I'm trying to ask is for now to you give me a rebuttal that essentially proposes that he is somehow consistent in his judgment, right?
Yeah. So
the exact same definition of me. So now I want you to give me an example.
Yeah, so the only way I can answer this is from a theological Christian worldview. That yes, God is rational and consistent in his judgment, and it's because of his all-knowing and omniscient mind. His reasons for doing things are, in fact, the most wise and the most rational, and that's from a Christian worldview. That's from a theological worldview. I cannot prove that to you with science or philosophy.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask. You have read the Bible, of course, all the way through, right? So if I were to ask you to give me a quote, you'd be able to give me a quote from the Bible, correct?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you Ruth chapter 3, verse 2. Yeah,
Okay.
no,
Great.
I can't give you a quote of everything in the Bible, dude.
Oh, okay.
I know I'm smart, but I'm not that smart, right? I can give you a general overview, perhaps. We could look at
Okay,
specific
that's
verses, but
absolutely. That's fine. I would ask, are you aware of Genesis 20? Specifically 20
hey, can you describe what it is?
17?
Give me a summary, please.
Genesis 20:11, excuse me. That is what I'm referring to here.
Okay, and
Well, I'm just asking if you're aware of it or not.
okay, I'm reading the verse now. Can you get to the question? Are you asking for a meeting, or what are you getting at here?
No, I'm asking if you're aware of it or not.
I'm reading the verse, so yes, I'm aware of it.
Okay, gotcha. You are reading the verse. That's great.
Mhm.
Okay, so essentially 20:11 states that Abraham said, "I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." I want you to give your own version of that.
My okay. Can we get to the actual question that you're saying here? I can give you the context of what's going on here, but what's your question concerning the verse?
Okay, fine. You want me to get to the actual question? Do you believe
Yeah,
that
what are
God
you trying to get
condemns
at?
incest or no?
Do you believe that God condemns incest? Is that your question?
Correct.
Yes, but what does this verse have anything to do with incest at all?
So just to reestablish it, you do believe that he condones incest.
No, he condemned. I thought you said condemns incest.
Well, hold on, because
He
there's a contention here.
oh,
Would you
can
like to know
you
what the contention is?
yeah, can you hurry this up and get to the point? I mean,
Yes,
I don't know
real
why you
quick.
couldn't get this verse.
Genesis
GFT only has 5 minutes left, and I want to get one more person up too. So if you could wrap it up, please.
Genesis 17:15, where it says, "And God said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name." What is essentially being proposed here, which is backed up by Genesis 20:12, is that he's essentially marrying the daughter of his father.
Uh, okay. I hope you know
Would
that
you like to
in
get
the
into the
context of
family
this
tree after
verse,
this?
the context is that Abraham's lying about Sarah being his sister because he's not his sister. So I don't know where you even were going with this verse.
Genesis 20:12
Um,
says that besides she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. If you're to tell me that we cannot take this at face value to be true, then how are we
did
to
you
take
read before
anything
the verse?
at face
Yeah. So
value
if you read
true?
before the verse, Abimelech apologizes to Abraham for his wife. Um, he asked in verse 10, and Bill asked Abraham, "What was the reason for you doing this?" And then we go into the context. Um, and so he lied to Abimelech about it. So I don't. If you read the verse in context, it doesn't say what you think it's saying. Um, it's a nice try, but that's not what happened. Abraham and Sarah are
Okay.
not related.
Just
So
one more question, Kurapika, if you don't mind, and then I'll go. I'm good. You believe that God is omniscient, right?
yes.
Okay. So then God should know what it feels like to take a dick in the ass, right? Not saying that he does take a dick in the ass, but he should know what it feels like.
Okay. What's your point? I found it very disrespectful. You're
Is that
making fun of
is that
God.
projection?
I
That
can,
was projection for sure.
I can say you feel like I can tell you that you know what it feels like to take a dick in the ass.
He was just trying
That
to
was,
joke.
I mean,
He was just
Yeah,
trying to joke his way
that was
out.
projection. You could hear it in the voice.
I mean, it's just, it doesn't, I don't understand what the point of that was. It's wasting everyone's time who wants to actually ask
All
like
right.
legitimate questions.
All
What's
right.
up, GFT?
John, what do you got?
How's it going?
Not bad, man. I'm just gonna ask you. Do you think that all like concepts are all tied to minds?
So I would think in our understanding, what we would conceive as concepts would be grounded in mind. Sure, yeah.
Okay. And would you say that truth is a concept?
I would think truth is just an arisen property of existence. If something is true, it exists, or it can be grounded in existence. Like,
You're saying that like things just being are true then?
well, yeah, like Jupiter existed before it was observed by people on Earth.
I think you're
Sure, it
thinking
was
of like
true. It existed regardless of observation.
I'm talking more like coherent truths, like something that is like that, something that's like logical. Not like the shirt I'm wearing is black or something. I'm asking like something bigger than that.
Maybe I'm just misunderstanding.
Well, let's go 1 + 1 = 2. Is that true?
That's how we categorize it. Sure. If our ancestors had came up with a different system where 1 + 1 = square and it worked better, then sure, like that's just what we be saying today. But it worked that 1 + 1 just worked, that 2 just helped.
Okay.
There were other
So
systems where it was like different things, but yeah.
so but 1 + 1 could never not equal 2, right? Like it could never equal something other than 2. Right? So like the truth of that
As long as we're
wouldn't
defining
change.
it that way.
Yeah, so the
Well,
truth
no, I
of
mean,
that
as long
wouldn't.
as we define it that way, yeah, sure.
Well, if you're to try and redefine numbers, you'd have a real big problem with all the current numbers
Well,
we
no,
have.
like I brought up earlier, like 1 ammonite, 2 ammonite. I could just go ammonites, and that still means 2 ammonites because 2 is a category of this. But I could also say 1 glass,
Yeah.
1 mug, and there's still 2 containers.
But those aren't
But
identical to the value 2. Those are physical
we
objects,
can,
right?
but
Two would be
because
something
no,
that's not
because
physical.
yeah, because we're using 2 as the category,
Yeah.
as a shorthand for the representation. It's no more some sort of arisen property other than that we observe it and say that for now we're colloquial saying those are 2 of a thing. Yeah.
And by arisen property, you don't mean an actual property, right? Like you don't mean physical property.
Well, no, like I mean, if you go into the forest and you see like 13 trees, it's just because we can categorize that number. That they didn't grow in a grove of exactly 13. We just go, oh, that's 13 trees right there. Like
So
it was just because we observed it, and there you go.
So it's a concept that's mind dependent, and then truth would be absolute, right? Truth isn't changing, otherwise it would just be false. So then, if truth transcends individual perspectives and interpretations like ours, like our minds, then truth would have to be tied to some other mind, right?
Well, are you saying that because we can observe things, something had to observe it before we observed it?
No,
been true in the first place?
what I'm saying is that we're not creating the truth. You said it yourself. The truth just is, right? And we agree that concepts are all mind dependent. So it's not our minds that are determining the truth. The truth is we are simply discovering it, and that truth would be tied to a mind of God.
That's a big leap. Well, for me, that would be the ad hoc fallacy. Like just because there would be an objective truth out there doesn't instantiate a God is like. It
would follow that,
physics, right?
It would follow that there's a mind outside of
follow.
ours. It would follow there's a mind outside of ours.
Well, could you to say that there's a mind outside of ours, you would have to presuppose that minds can exist outside of brain states or brain matter, which that would be your work to do that before you can then presuppose that it would therefore entail a mind. Or so I mean,
Actually,
Well,
ad hoc.
I don't
I gotta
think you
stop you.
can-
Wait, I gotta stop you here because if you look at some digital physics arguments, it actually says that information precedes the actual emergent property itself. So it actually mind comes over matter in some digital physics conclusions. I can send you the material on that, but it's very interesting. Physics is actually turning the other way on it. That information perceives and emerges properties out of that. So essentially, a mind can come before matter. Which is
Either
very
way,
interesting.
if you find the word God icky, either way, you could just use absolute mind, which would point to something that we would call God, and then we would say that this belief is rational from our view.
I wouldn't even say mind. I don't. Because then that would be projecting a worldview on me because I don't claim that a mind can exist outside of a living brain. I don't accept that that's a possibility. So to me it would be tantamount to saying a unicorn could create universes, and I don't accept unicorns exist. Like I don't believe that minds exist outside of living, breathing agents. Like I would accept.
Yeah, I'm not sure
For me,
you.
I have such a definition that a flatworm has a mind. It's conscious of its world around it. It takes in outward stimuli and it redirects its habits based on necessity of its existence. And so it has a mind, and it's a risen property from evolution. But I would never say that there was a mind and then it implanted itself into life, or somehow a mind made life and then was able to make the life have a mind of its own. Like those are not my words; those would be your words. So I claim from the outset that we evolved on this planet, a long time ago, and we are observing things, and that you want to say that it's because they exist. There's a truth that ground them. Merely, I'm saying, oh look, we see a bunch of things, and we say, isn't that nifty?
Well, I'll leave it at this. Zen already brought this up as well, but even if that is your belief that we're all just randomness that evolved, then anyone who randomly evolved to believe in God, that would be totally rational from your view, because rationality really doesn't even exist in your view. There is no laws of logic that are existent. So
I think I already said that too. From my worldview, it'd still be irrational, but thanks for playing.
I mean, we would be more evolutionarily more fit anyways, because the theists tend to have more children than the atheists. So at the end of the day, rejecting God is actually not beneficial for natural selection at all.
But I'd rather believe more true things than false things. So I'm fine not believing in world-ending flood myths and stuff like that. But
just the meteoric flood. But yeah, okay. Have a good one.
Well,
GFT,
no, the meteor that's a whole other thing. We could have that one. Y'all have a good one. Y'all take care.
Yeah, take care, GFT.
Thank you, Sean. Hey, GFT, do you have time for one more?
Oh, one more. Yeah.
I don't know if his. Okay, cool. I don't know if he's here for Josh.
Yeah, I'm here for Father
Okay.
Time.
Okay, Father. If you want to go ahead and leave, you could do that, or you could wait. It's up to you.
Well, I got one. What you got?
Okay,
I'll try to be short.
I'll try to be quick. So, is there evolutionary utility in like us having learned to like seek out food as opposed to not learning to consume food?
Certainly, there was a point in time in our the precursors of life where photosynthesis was the predominant way of making fuel for existence. After that, due to competition, predation became part of that, and then from that, other forms of life arose, and then other niches came out of that for.
Yeah, I mean, I do mean
niches.
in the context of Homo sapiens. I mean, yeah, I do mean in the context of Homo sapiens. I mean,
oh yeah, I mean, it was already a learned behavior by that point. Sure, like at that point, we were already using
Yes,
yeah.
so my point is that we evolved to learn how to eat because it's true that we ought to eat, right? So when
I mean,
when you're saying so when you're saying that like we've collectively just believed in God because it serves some evolutionary utility, how do you determine like which things we've come to believe which are true versus which things we've come to believe which are kind of just like not really true or they're like synthetically true, what we our brain chemicals lie to us
oh,
and tell them that they're true because they serve some like arbitrary evolutionary utility.
sure.
Like how do I know that this isn't the case with your view, that
Well,
your brain chemicals are
pareidolia is
lying
a
to you and
thing,
telling you that
right?
naturalism is true because of some ends that you're driven to meet?
Well, pareidolia is a thing, right? People see things, they hear things, they think it's a thing. Back in the day, like if you thought that when the bush rustled was just the breeze, and it in the words of Simpson's Al Gore, it's not the wind, like it was
Hmm.
a saber tooth or an American lion or something coming through that, like you were selected out of the gene pool. So there were certainly times where people thought it ought better to hedge on the side of caution to sacrifice their kids to angry gods that were not bringing the crops because of famine, but because they didn't know about weather patterns or you know um, different blockages or changes in streams that would
Hmm.
take irrigation away from them. So sure, I mean, people throughout time have used whatever they thought was available at them at to come to conclusions, but that wouldn't mean that any along the way it was rational that was an option. They just put a placeholder, like I said from the outset. Like then italicize I as a -1 to a -1. It's an imaginary number. It's
Hmm.
in chemistry, it's in
Yes,
mathematics,
but how do we know
and
what
I
the
mean,
placeholder is? Like, how do I know that like magical molecules which you like that
well,
undermine like
back in the
the
day,
primordial soup theory? Like, how do I know, or that that are the foundation of the primordial soup theory? How do I know that these magical molecules are not like the placeholder in your view?
well, like I said, I don't say they're magical molecules, but I think Josh agreed that we're all made of atoms. I mean, I don't know if
Hmm.
you do or not, but I
Yeah.
mean, there is a geologic record of things. There is a layer of organic carbon that is dated like 3.2 billion years ago, which is like shortly after the Earth cooled in time scale, life was starting to try to bubble up from what it was. I mean, I
Hmm.
I say that life is natural, and so it's only a natural process. And I mean, I know Josh, like there's a lot of that stuff, like if you want to say like these intrinsic numbers, like our planet was one of you know 8 that we are orbiting our sun. Life showed up because we're in the habitable zone. The habitable zone is a couple of million light years across. Like when we orbit the sun, because of a wobble. Like there are times of the year where we're closer to the sun. There are times of the year where we're further from the sun. And if you're saying that it's to be so precise that it can't move at all, life would just be eradicated in 1 year because we wobble so much throughout that time. And
Hmm.
there are even studies that show that like they're looking at large planets that have moons, and because of the gravitational forces of these large planets, i.e. Saturn and Jupiter, the planet is kept warm, and so life could potentially evolve in these conditions, showing that life is possible in exoplanets, not even where host suns are. So I mean, just because we haven't observed it doesn't mean it's not there, but to say that.
Hmm. Yeah. So like the purpose behind my very simple question about like our having evolved to seek out food was to try to elucidate that even if you're arguing that it serves as evolutionary utility to believe in God, this actually would seem to serve as evidence that it would be true, because it's always more useful to believe something that is true than it is like to believe something that is
I
untrue. Would you disagree
No,
with this?
well, yeah, I would say that. Like we have plenty of people today that believe that like the election was stolen. We have tons of people today that believe that Trump is still president. There are tons of people that believe nonsensical things, and it doesn't mean they're true. A belief is an assertion, and a fact is an assertion. but a belief doesn't become a fact because it's asserted. But I think that's all the time I got. Yeah,
Okay.
fun.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you, GFT from PNR and Josh from Coast to Coast. I don't know if y'all want to continue this here, if we want to drag it down.
Yeah,
I think that's that.
I gotta step in for a little bit. So, I guess we can take it elsewhere. I'll maybe be back in a couple minutes. But thank you guys for having me, and thank you for your questions. I'll talk to some of you guys later.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one, bro. And thank you all. Bye.